Hi, we're Shannon and Jerry Arner.
And our dog, Betty White.
Your hosts of the Arner Adventures podcast.
Could we have named it something more creative? Probably. But it's the name of our blog. It's our last name. We're on an adventure. Yada, yada, yada. After owning our own business, working 24/7.
And don't forget a mental breakdown in between.
We made a lifestyle change and decided to make the most out of life.
We sold our house, most of our belongings, downsized, and moved to the coast.
We live life minimally, but fully.
We live each day as an adventure.
This show will help you learn how to live life more fully, with more intention, by experiencing more, and with less stuff.
We'll talk about our own experiences, interview others who have much to share by creating a spark in our lives.
Some days we'll share real-life ongoings of what we're going through, and others will talk about our favorite flavor of waffle.
Come join our adventure.
It's the Arner Adventures Podcast. Hello, everybody. I'm Jerry.
And I'm Shannon.
Betty White is hanging here inside of her PETA, and we're back for episode 54 of the Arner Adventures Podcast.
This is the final episode of the year. Can you believe that?
I cannot believe that.
We made it through 2022, hitting every single week, dropping an episode every week.
Every single week. Our previous guest, Flobo Boyce, also a mentor of ours in the podcast world, says, you just have to be consistent with your episodes. And gosh, we've been consistent. I'm so proud of us.
Me too.
That is so cool.
Flobo was the one that we reached out to and, said, we're thinking about starting this podcast. What pointers do you have? And there's a number, and we said it in the beginning, that you need to get to, and it's more likely that you're going to continue. Do you remember what week that was? 7 or 12 or
something? Yeah, it was something that we're way beyond that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know. 54.
Yeah, 54, man.
Oh,
that is so cool.
Well, we haven't even talked about this yet, but when I had COVID last April and you hadn't caught it yet, we were trying to stay away from each other in the house. We thought that maybe there'd be a chance you wouldn't get it. That was really funny.
It was, yeah.
And we still recorded an episode then from separate rooms. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. I know. That's dedication, right?
And I remember I've gone back and listened to that when it was the Earth Day one.
Uh-huh.
And I sound like death.
Yeah.
And I'm just smiling, trying to get through it. And now when I listen to it, I'm like, gosh, nobody even said, hey, what was wrong with you or anything. They probably just thought I had a cold. But I was past the part where I was laying in the bed thinking, I'll never get out of this bed again. I was sitting on the side of the bed recording it in there.
Yeah.
And then you were in here.
Oh, God, that's funny to think back on.
I know, but that's dedication right there, you know?
That is. Speaking of dedication, our guest today, he is truly a spark in our lives. His name is John McFadzean, and he is such an inspirational story. Very timely as we head into a new year. He is going to really get you amped and ready to take on new feats in your life. Maybe challenge yourself to do something that is out of the box.
I know. You've seen it, and we'll talk about it at the end because you weren't a part of the actual interview, but you feel inspired, don't you?
Oh, yeah. It was, I really loved seeing what the interview you had with him. It was great.
Yeah. Should we just go ahead and get to the conversation?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay. Our guest today is John McFadzean. Following a remarkable coincidence one Saturday morning in June of 2014, John decided to throw aside a lifetime of fear of failure and try something new. Over the following years, a tiny seed of an idea germinated in his brain, which eventually led him to embark on a lifetime quest to go stand-up paddleboarding in every country in the world. In 47 countries so far, he still has some way to go. As John says himself, I won't be finished before Christmas. John is a passionate public speaker who loves stand-up paddleboarding. So as you can imagine, he absolutely loves talking about stand-up paddleboarding as well. And we're going to talk about it today. Twice longlisted and commended for the prestigious Bradt New Travel Writer of the Year award, John is an accomplished storyteller with numerous dramatic, exciting, and humorous stories in his repertoire. We are so excited for you, John, to be here. Thank you so much.
It's wonderful to be here, Shannon. Thank you for inviting me.
I will also thank you because you're in the UK. There's a time difference, so thank you for accommodating that as well.
It's 8 o'clock in the evening here, so I was going to say good evening, but I guess I should say good afternoon because it's still afternoon for you.
Yeah, it is. It's about a little after 3 o'clock this time as we're recording. So I always like to talk about where are people currently, but then when there's a time difference, I always like to point that out for our audience too, so they can kind of get an idea of it. So tell us where you are currently.
Okay, so I'm from Scotland originally. You can probably tell from
Yep.
my last name and my accent, but
Yep.
I've spent the last 30 years living in a small town in the northwest of England. It's called Southport, which is just a little bit north of Liverpool, which your listeners may have heard of in England. And
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. I live in a lovely third floor apartment here with a fantastic view. Obviously, not right now because it's dark, but during the daytime, it's a very lovely place to live.
Now we have a mental picture, which I think we always like to have. So of course, we were so intrigued when we read about you and read about your story. We really relate to the fear of failure part. We talk about the fear aspect in so much of what mine and Jerry's life. When you just finally decide, okay, I'm going to get past that, it's scary. And a lot of people say you should do something every day that scares you. And so I feel like I always tend to stay away from the fear. But I also know that we've made decisions in our life that were fearful and that we are where we are now because of it. So I would love it if you could tell us what inspired you to, because you haven't been stand up paddleboarding your whole life. So I'm intrigued by if you could tell our audience what inspired you to go after it and to be now an experienced stand up paddleboarder.
Yes, I mean it is a story that began, just over 8 years ago in June 2014, and I don't have any background prior to that in, water sports or anything. Some people came into stand-up paddleboarding from a surfing background or a canoeing and kayaking, but I've never done anything like that, and it never even appealed to me. But for a remarkable coincidence, one Saturday in June 2014, and I mentioned earlier on, I live in a third floor apartment, and if the sun was shining, I would open that blind behind me, and
Yeah.
you could look out and see the view that I look out to. It's quite spectacular. If you look to your right, you can see the hills and fells of the English Lake District, and there's a famous in the UK anyway, a famous seaside town called Blackpool in the
Uh-huh.
foreground with there's a big roller coaster there called the Big One. And if you look the other way, you can see North Wales and the mountains of North Wales there as well. And right in
Wow.
front of you is a man-made Victorian lake called Southport Marine Lake. And I look out, I look out that window obviously every day of my life. It's where I live, but that particular Saturday morning, I saw something I'd never seen before. There were three people out in the middle of the lake, and they were each standing on what looked like a kind of a large surfboard and propelling themselves across the surface of the water with a large paddle. And I'd never seen anything like it. And I remember thinking to myself, those people must be crazy. If they fall off, they're going to get wet. Let's face it, nobody wants to get wet. I wasn't even concerned about them drowning. I was just thinking of them getting wet
Okay,
if they
well,
fell in the water. And I would probably have never thought another thing about it if it wasn't for a remarkable coincidence, because later that day I took my two youngest daughters, Jessica and Jasmine, to their dancing class. They used to go to somewhere called the Fitness Factory. They
uh-huh.
did a street dance class on a Saturday afternoon. And when I took them in that day, there was a poster up on the wall, and it had a photograph of someone doing this paddling activity, and it said stand-up paddleboarding lessons. So it was almost like a
Wow.
calling, a synchronicity. So I said to Amy, who's the lady that owned the Fitness Factory at the time, I said, Amy, what is this stand-up paddleboarding thing? I saw three people out on the lake this morning doing that exact thing. And she said, oh, that'll be my partner, Alan. He does lessons on the lake. You should go for a lesson. And I remember saying to Amy, oh, I'd like to, Amy, but, my balance isn't very good. I'd probably fall in and get wet. And Amy just laughed at me and she said, that's what everyone says, just go for it. And it made me realize, there is nothing wrong with my balance. My balance is no better and no worse than anyone else's. And it made me realize that that's the excuse most people give for that. Nowadays, when I say to people, try stand-up paddleboard, they say, "Oh, I'd love to, but my balance isn't very good," and really, it was just an excuse. It was just negative self-talk. And that was why I found myself booking that very first lesson in June 2014.
When you went out there, did you find that you immediately were like, this is great, I'm going to do it? Or were you sort of like, oh, okay, I'm glad I tried this out, I might do it again? Like, what was your immediate thought?
I was a little bit nervous before the lesson because, as I say, I didn't have any background in that kind of thing.
So listen, we're probably not the first to introduce you to the topic of CBD or CBD oil. If you're anything like us, it seems like every time you turn around, you're seeing a neon sign for CBD sold here at your local grocery store, in a window as you're driving by, or it flashes across your screen in an online ad.
Shannon's sister told us about the benefits she was having from a brand she was using, and then we started paying attention to that brand.
Spoiler alert, that brand is Danodan. Full transparency, we get about 2 to 3 CBD brands reaching out to us every week. And it wasn't until we started digging into the research that we learned that CBD isn't always CBD. They're just not all the same.
Danodan Hempworks makes organic hemp flower infusions. They're more than just CBD. Danodan's range of hemp products dissolve easily into any liquid and support your routine by helping you manage daily stress, promote healthy sleep, provide caffeine-free energy, and recover from activity-related stiffness and soreness.
They also have CBD hemp flower infusion specifically designed for pets, and Betty White uses it every day. She loves it. We put it on her food. And with Danodan, you'll enjoy all the benefits of legal hemp, not just 1 or 2 compounds isolated in a lab. Get 20% off right now with the code ADVENTURE at danodan.com. We'll link it for you in the show notes. That's 20% off right now with the code ADVENTURE at danodan.com.
Danodan, more than just CBD.
And it was quite a strange evening. That evening, it was a very sort of warm, those warm summer's evenings that you can still feel the heat of the sun on your skin, even though it's sort of, I think it was at 7 o'clock in the evening, and
Yeah.
the sky was blue. There wasn't a cloud in sight, and we sort of set off over the lake. There was Lucy, who was my instructor, and Claire, who was the other lady that was having a lesson at the same time. And I remember being really sort of tensed up, and all my legs were stiff because I was worried about that falling in and getting wet. And the craziest thing happened after about 20 minutes, just from nowhere. A huge dark grey cloud just came over the horizon. It came over the lake, and it just started lashing it down with rain. And one of my most prized photographs I've got was a photograph of that lesson, and you can see myself and Lucy and Claire out in the middle of the lake. And there are people walking past in the foreground, huddling under a huge red golf umbrella. It was that wet. But of course, what happens when it rains, you get wet. And once I was wet, I stopped worrying about falling in. It was love at first sight. I just felt so relaxed and happy being out in the water, and always a sort of meditative aspect to it, of just being present in the moment, because I was either concentrating on learning a new sport, or I was just sort of standing there and swaying gently from side to side, and just relaxing. And I think not just that evening, but any other time I've paddled, it's a great way and a great opportunity to leave your trials and tribulations of real life behind you.
Right.
Although it depends what you call real life. Maybe real life stand-up paddleboarding, and the fake life's the other part.
My personal experience is that I have signed up in my lifetime for paddleboarding twice. And I'm not, I don't know, I guess maybe the fear is also getting wet, which is ridiculous. It's not like the water is lava,
Yeah.
But something has come up both times. I've not been able to actually go for the lesson, and it really did come up. Like, I really do want to do it. But when I read your story, I was like, okay, and we live here on the coast. And so I said, okay, I definitely need to do this. This is something that I want to do. But there's one thing saying, okay, I really like this. And then there's another saying, okay, now I'm going to stand up paddleboard in every country in the world. So where did you get there? And was it just like, okay, if I set this goal, it'll keep me doing it? Or what inspired you to have that quest?
Yeah, it sort of grew gradually, to be honest, Shannon. And shortly after I had that lesson, I was due to go to Australia to attend the wedding of a very good friend. And I was quite naive back then. I remember thinking, I wonder if they do stand-up paddleboarding in Australia. You know, of course they do. Water sports are huge in Australia, but I didn't really know. You know, and I went onto the internet and I went onto Google and I googled stand-up paddleboarding Sydney, and a SUP school in Sydney came up, and I ended up booking a tour around Sydney Harbour for while I was there, and that's still one of the most memorable experiences of my life.
Oh,
We didn't go right into the harbour, but you know, I've got photographs of me paddling with the Opera House and Sydney Harbour Bridge behind me, and it was one of the most epic paddleboarding locations I think anywhere in the world. And
yeah.
but you know, that wasn't really the beginning of the whole let's do the whole world. You know, it was just a one-off. But then maybe a few months after that, I was going to Portugal to attend a sort of training course or retreat type thing. And I remember thinking, I wonder if you can go paddle boarding on the Algarve in Portugal. Like, you know, of course you can. It's a huge thing there, you know. So I ended up booking a trip with a guy called Nick from Sup Algarve, and we went along the coast there, and he took me into a few caves. You know, there were caves you could paddle into, and then there was a gap in the roof that the sun was shining through, and it was just
Oh,
an exquisite experience. And it
yeah.
went from there. You know, the next one was a family holiday to Italy and France. So I paddled in Italy and France. And when I put some photographs on Facebook from France, my friend Lucy Pierce, who was the same Lucy that gave me that lesson in 2014, and she wrote something. I think she said, "Oh, paddle the world with John McFadzean," and it was just a throwaway line from her. And I thought, oh, I wonder if I could do that, you know. And it's just grown from there. And I describe it as a lifetime quest, you know, because people say, you know, if you make something a goal, you know, you have to put time scales on it. And if I've still got maybe about 150 countries to go. So if I said I wanted to do that in the next 10 years, I'd have to do 15 a year. And then if I got to October and I'd only done 3 that year, oh no,
Yeah.
I've got to do another 12 before Christmas. Let's cancel Christmas this year. So there's a risk it could become a chore, and I don't want that to happen. So I describe it as a lifetime quest, and I guess I just
Yeah.
hope that my lifetime will be long enough to allow me to achieve that quest.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people wish they had been to 47 countries, period, just to
Yeah,
visit.
yeah.
You know, thinking about, oh, yeah, you have this many ahead of you, 47 countries to have been to, and then to have stand up paddleboard in all of those countries is amazing. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I mean, you're able to recognize that, right?
I think so. Yeah, I don't. I mean, you can't know for sure, but I don't think there's anyone else who's been stand-up paddleboarding in 47 countries. And
Yeah.
most people, as you say, most people wouldn't have visited 47 countries. And
Yeah.
I guess just to some extent, I have to acknowledge a certain privilege there. You know, I live in the UK. I hold a UK passport. I can visit most countries in the world. You know, there are a lot of countries where if you know, and you're the same as well. If you hold a United
Yeah.
States passport, I think you're welcome almost everywhere in the world, as I
Yeah.
am. But you know, a lot of people don't have that privilege, or you know, perhaps their family circumstances or their health circumstances mean that they don't have those opportunities. So I do acknowledge that I'm privileged, but you know, also I've had to go out there and make those things happen, and I've had to push through those sort of fear of failure and self-doubt. You know, quite often in the days leading up to going on a trip, I have those voices in my head telling, oh, just cancel the trip. You know, nobody even knows you're going, or you just tell people you're not well, you know. And I have to
Yeah.
fight through that self-doubt
Yeah.
every single time, you know. And I don't know why I have the self-doubt every single time, but it does get easier to deal with because I know what the outcome's going to be, but I still have the voices. It's strange.
I think, speaking for myself, and I know Jerry too, but I think also a lot of the people that we've had on our episodes, I always am intrigued by mindset. And I feel like everyone talks about having those voices, and they have to work hard to overcome that and to, change that talk. And so I feel like you're pretty normal with that.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I know it's a daily effort to change it. I mean, I can hear the dialogue sometimes just can be negative or worrying or whatever. But yeah, I'm thinking about how I can book, lunch with somebody and I'm trying to get out of it. So I can't even imagine
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
to another country to paddleboard and trying to get out of that too. But you talked about having that experience in Sydney and it being just almost magical, just seeing the things that you see and almost being meditative. I can picture that. But I'm sure you have a plethora of wild, funny, scary stories. What is one of the let's start with one of the craziest, one of the wildest moments you've experienced
Yeah. I mean,
while you're paddleboarding?
this story is, almost unbelievable. If I didn't have a photograph of this incident, I'd maybe assume I'd been hallucinating or something. But I went on a sort of driving and wild camping trip through Northern Europe in 2019, and my goal was to reach a town at the very top of Norway called Hammerfest, which is sort of billed as the northernmost city in the world. It's not really a city; it's probably a large village or a small town, but it's right at the top of Norway. And I had this dream to go there, and stand up paddleboard there at midnight on the summer solstice, which of course, at
Oh,
that time of year it never gets dark inside the
yeah.
Arctic Circle at all. So I
Yeah.
had this goal to go to Hammerfest, and on the way there, I found myself wild camping one night on the banks of a river called the River Torne, which forms the border between Sweden and Finland for a large section of that border. And I was really in the middle of nowhere. I think the nearest human being was quite a long way away, and I'd pitched my tent at the side of the river, and I'd had a look at the river, but it was flowing fast, and there was a lot of white water and rocks sticking out. So I decided it was too dangerous.
This episode is brought to you by Southern Oak Artisan.
We love Southern Oak Artisan. Their candles bring a really cool vibe to our bungalow.
They do. Southern Oak Artisan makes 100% natural soy candles that are not only aesthetically pleasing, and we love that they're in these, really cute little jars, reusable, by the way, but their clean scents are light and not overwhelming like other candles.
My favorite is the morning brew. Any time of day that smells good.
Mine is the lime but no salt. Or maybe the Sommelier Chardonnay. Do you think there's a theme going with me there?
Oh, maybe. They have really great scents to choose from. They are only made with the highest quality ingredients, so they aren't toxic like a lot of candles are. 100% natural soy, clean fragrance oils. You just feel good with the air in your home being clean while burning these candles.
Yes. Well, for our listeners, we have a discount code. It is Adventure, and it will save you 10% off of your order at southernoakartisan.com or their Etsy shop. We're going to link it for you in the show notes too.
Southern Oak Artisan, curating something a little bit extra. It's the Southern way.
For me to paddle, and also it was going so fast that I would never be able to get back to my starting point. So I decided, right, I'm not going to paddle here, but I will pitch my tent. And it was about 11 o'clock in the evening. It was getting darker, but it never got dark all night. It was light all night.
Yep.
But there was a slight chill in the air, so I pulled the hood up of my hoodie, and I pulled my coat hood over my head as well, partly to ward off the cold, but also there were mosquitoes buzzing around as well, trying to have me for their evening meal.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I did what anyone else would do in that circumstance. You know the rules of the modern life. If there's no photographs on Facebook, it didn't even happen. So
Right.
I got my selfie stick out and I took a photograph of myself, and I the river's, but this raging river's behind me. I'm wrapped up. You can actually see mosquitoes in the photos, and I felt like
Oh,
a really brave explorer, the sort of paddleboarding version of Sir Edmund Hillary or someone. And
right,
just
right.
after I took that photograph, I heard a kind of thud, thud, thud noise from round the river bend upstream. And I thought, what on earth is that? And I was slightly concerned at what it might be, because I thought I was in
Right.
the complete wilderness. And I turned round, and just round that river bend came a giant inflatable pink flamingo. There were three people sitting in the corners
What?
paddling this flamingo down the river, and the chap in the back was sitting. He had a beatbox with some Europop blaring out. That was the thud, thud, thud that I'd heard, and he was
What?
drinking from a bottle of beer. And I thought, maybe I'm not quite in the wilderness after all, or maybe these people are just a lot braver than I am on the pink flamingo. And as I say, if I didn't have a photograph of that pink flamingo, I would doubt my own recollection that actually happens.
I mean, yeah, if you didn't have a photo, you would have to say, well, did I hallucinate that?
Yeah.
Was I really tired? What was the deal? Because I don't think anyone would believe that.
No.
Oh my gosh. So then did that inspire you to go ahead and paddle that river or no?
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
I still, you have to sort of do your own risk assessment when you're going to
Yeah.
paddle somewhere, and I think,
Yeah.
it might have been right for those three people to do that, but it wasn't right for me. And
Right.
I guess being on my own as well, there was three of them. If one of them had got into trouble, perhaps they could have
Right.
look out for each other. But I was on my own, so I
Yeah.
just got into my tent and went to sleep.
Do you always stand up paddleboard during the day or have you ever gone at night?
I have paddled at night a few times, and I mean, I did actually make it to Hammerfest and paddle at night at midnight, but it wasn't dark. The sun was still sort of
Right.
hanging low in the sky. But I have paddled after dark, and that can be a magical experience as well. Because quite often the wind drops when it gets dark, and it
Yeah.
can be quite still. And if the moon's out and the stars are shining, it can be quite a
Oh,
beautiful experience.
oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Out of those 47 countries, have you been to a country that made you a little leery about paddleboarding there? Has anyone ever said, what are you doing and being negative about it, or has the response in the countries always been, yeah, it's fine, it's normal?
Yeah, I think I feel that I've always been made welcome wherever I've gone.
Okay.
And I've tried sort of lately, I've tried to sort of make contact with people in the countries that I'm going to, and arrange to paddle with them. Back in the early days, I was maybe a little bit insular. It was just me and my board, and I'd get on the water and get off again, and get my spreadsheet out and put a tick against Croatia or something. But I've tried. You really tried the last few years to sort of make contact with other paddlers in those
Yeah.
countries, and that trip around Northern Europe, for example, that I mentioned, I made contact with some other paddlers in Sweden and in Denmark, and where else, in Latvia. When I came back down, I paddled with some people in Latvia and in Prague and Czechia as well. So I've tried to sort of catch up with other people and paddle with them. And
Yeah.
I guess just talking about that same subject, I've just come back last week from doing a section of the Danube, which runs
Oh,
from Bratislava in Slovakia down to Budapest in Hungary. It was a 232-mile section. And just the week before, I put a note on Facebook and I said, "Is anyone here from Bratislava?" And a chap got in touch with me and said, "I am. What do you want?" So I told him about my quest. And I said, "Do you want to paddle with me, even for 1 hour or one day?" And he said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I can't. I'm going away on my family holiday." But I got a message the next day from one of his friends who said that one of his friends was going to paddle from Vienna to Budapest. And the timing of It's a chap called Ludek from the Czech Republic, and the timing of his quest meant he would be leaving Bratislava the same day that I was. So I paddled that whole 230 kilometers with Ludek from the Czech Republic. Ludek doesn't speak any English. I don't speak any Czech. We had to use Google Translate to try and speak to each other. But it was still fantastic company. He's a crazy guy, Ludek. He's done a lot of adventures. I think he's quite a YouTube star in
Oh,
Czechia. He would,
wow.
if he was listening to this, he would be interrupting me to say he's from Moravia. So Moravia is a district of Czechia, if you like. So
Okay.
and he may well listen to this podcast, so I better make that correction now. But it all went really well apart from day 2, when I thought we'd wild camped on the first night and we were planning to wild camp on the second night again. And I thought Ludek had got somewhere in mind to camp. So I was just sort of following him. And he
Right.
thought I had somewhere in mind to camp. So he was just following me. And the irony is I did have somewhere in my plan, but I just paddled past it because I thought I was following Ludek. And suddenly it got to, gosh, it's just about to get dark. We better find somewhere to camp. And we ended up, it was a beautiful spot, but it was quite an urban place. It was just on a beach next to a city. We were more or less under a road and a rail bridge where there was traffic going over all night, and
Right.
we had to camp on a sort of gravelly beach, which was on a bit of a slope as well. But the sunset was beautiful, and I've got that story to carry around with me for the rest of my life as well.
Yes. You're doing this. You go to a different country, you land, or however you get there, but let's just say you land and do you bring your paddleboard or you look for one there?
Yeah, I almost always take my own board now. But
Okay.
so back in the early days, I would occasionally book either a hire board or a guided tour with someone, and I was let down quite a few times with that. So for example, somebody in Vienna contacted me about 2 days before to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, the weather's forecast not looking very good. I'm going to have to cancel." And really,
Oh.
there was nothing wrong with the weather because I managed to find somewhere to hire a board, and the weather was fine. And I've also hired equipment where some boards have got 3 fins, but one of the fins was missing, or
Oh.
we use a leash to attach ourselves to the board as a safety
Mhm.
requirement or safety equipment. So once I hired a board and they didn't give me a leash, so I've learnt that lesson really, and I almost always take my own equipment with me now, unless I strongly believe I can rely on an in-country supplier to supply me. So if I was going back to Australia, I'd probably hire a board in Australia rather than take it with me. But
Okay. So when you get there, I'm guessing because you're sort of traveling, I guess, on this to your next stop in some cases. So do you just have a backpack that fits your tent and everything that you need?
yeah, I mean it's a little bit more than that. The stand-up paddle boards, most of them are inflatable, so you deflate it, you roll it up, and
Oh,
it goes into quite a large rucksack. You
okay.
you can get a little bit of extra stuff in the rucksack. You see, you can probably get a few clothes in, and if I'm going camping, I can get my
Uh-huh.
camping stove and cooking pots and pans and things in there as well. But really, you need your rucksack that's got your suck board in it, and you need at least another sort of rucksack for a few more clothes and miscellaneous items. But it's quite
Okay.
a lot to sort of carry through airports and things.
Yeah.
But that's just it's
Yeah.
part of the quest.
You've had all these trips so far up to 360 kilometers on many of the bodies of water. So I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine you have to maybe have a strong core. You probably have to have some kind of a health and workout regimen. Is that right? And what is your routine for
Yeah,
staying
I'd
healthy?
say yes and no to that. I've been a little bit lazy recently, especially maybe sort of going back to when COVID and lockdown came along, prior to that, I sort of exercised fairly regularly and went to the gym fairly regularly. Now, I haven't really got going again with that exercise since we've been released back into the wild, if you like.
Yeah, yeah.
I do go to the gym occasionally, but not what I should do. So I don't really have a training regimen for stand-up paddleboarding, but I guess because
Okay.
I've done so much paddleboarding over the years, I think those muscle groups are
Oh,
fairly strong anyway. But the long distance stuff, I don't know if you can really train for that.
I know.
How do you train for a 360-kilometer paddle? The only way to train for it really is to do a 360-kilometer paddle. But I have this kind of theory that going back to my early days in paddling, I'd probably do 2 kilometers or 5 kilometers or whatever. I hadn't done very much long distance stuff
Right.
until those lockdown years, really, when I decided to start. Once we were allowed back out again, but we couldn't sort of go to work or go abroad or anything. I decided to explore the English Lake District, which I mentioned earlier. I can see
Yeah.
the hills from my window.
You know what I've realized?
What's that, Jer?
People think that when the temperatures cool down that you don't need to drink as much water.
Dehydration can happen any time of year. Drinking water is important year round.
It's easy to stay hydrated with Liquid IV.
Absolutely. Liquid IV is a hydration multiplier. It's a powder and a packet, so you can take them with you wherever you go.
It's an electrolyte mix that you just add to your water. It delivers 2 to 2.5 more hydration than water alone.
So many flavors to choose from, too. Grape, tropical punch, guava, passion fruit, strawberry.
Okay. Liquid IV has a ton of flavors. There is something for everyone. If you want your water to work harder for you, you should definitely try Liquid IV.
And for our listeners, if you go to their website, liquid-iv.com, and use code Arner Adventures, you can save 15% and get free shipping.
We'll link it in the show notes too. Liquid IV, fueling life's adventures.
And I decided to paddle around the perimeter of all of the lakes there that you can paddle on, which was that was my sort of healing, if you like, to I found that sort of 2020 and 21 quite difficult,
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
mental health. I
Mhm.
live on my own, although luckily I was able to see my 2 youngest daughters even
Yeah.
during lockdown. But it's difficult being sort of stuck in the house on your own, and it didn't do any favors for my mental health. But getting back
Right.
out and exploring the Lake District was my blue therapy or green therapy, if you like, and
Yes. Yes.
that kind of led me to this quest to I'll paddle around the perimeter of all of the 12 lakes there that you're allowed to paddle on. So I did, and I built up gradually to Windermere, which is the largest lake in England, and the perimeter of that lake's 42 kilometers, and I'd never paddled that distance before. But I remember saying to myself, if you can paddle 20 kilometers, you can paddle 30. If you can
Yeah.
paddle 30, you can paddle 40. So I just convinced myself that I
Huh.
can do it, and I think the way I paddle, certainly long distance stuff, that it's on par with walking in terms of the amount of exertion involved. So
Yeah.
it's difficult and it's hard work to walk for 11 hours a day, but most people's bodies are capable of doing that. I couldn't
Yeah.
run for 11 hours a day, but I can walk for 11 hours a day. I can stand up paddle for 11 hours a day. So
Right.
I did complete that 42 on Windermere. And then the next year I went to Loch Lomond, which is the largest loch in Scotland, and it's 90 kilometres all the way round. So I said to myself, well, you should paddle 42.
You
You
can
can
do
paddle
9.
90. And you can definitely do that. And then when I did that 360 on the Danube last year, that was from Passau in Germany to Bratislava. And I remember saying to myself, well, if you can paddle 90, you can paddle 360. Obviously, the
Oh my.
92 was in 2 days. The 360 took me 8. But you can do these things if you're reasonably healthy. So I don't have any particular training that I do enable me to do that. I am able to go and do it, I guess.
Probably that you keep it up also, just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you said, it builds those muscles that maybe in the beginning weren't quite, maybe ready, but maybe it's some good muscle memory of
yeah.
doing it.
I
So,
definitely, I recall the first couple of times I went paddling, the muscles in my legs were so sore the next day I could barely walk downstairs.
yeah,
And
yeah.
now look at me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. You brought up the mental health part of it, and we can totally relate. COVID and being in lockdown and all of that it was really difficult for a lot of people, but for me, and we had curfews at some time, but I started walking. Like, I had never walked as much as I had during COVID and or during that period of time. So I can relate to, it is hard on your mental health, especially when you can't do something and you can't be active. And I think, there's studies that show that being active and being able to do things does improve your mental health. So I'm wondering if you can tell us what mental and overall life lessons have you personally taken away from stand-up paddleboarding across the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've learned a few things, and one of them, I guess, is I've alluded to this already. In fact, I've spoken about it already. Is sort of overcoming that fear of failure and the negative self-talk. Because that conversation I had with Amy in the fitness factory, where she laughed and said, "Everyone says that you'll be fine," and that was a sliding doors moment for me, because I had a choice, either to listen to my own negative voice telling me, "Don't do it, you'll fall in and you'll get wet," or
Right.
I could have listened to Amy's voice saying, "Just do it, you'll be fine." And I chose to listen to Amy, and I try and carry that lesson around with me, as to, you can't, you don't, get me wrong, you can't do everything, you can't try everything. No one's got the time or the money to do everything that they might be tempted to do, but I think we can say yes to opportunities just a little bit more often than we
Yeah.
have done previously. And I think that opens up, a whole new world for any of us. So there's definitely a life lesson in there, I'm sure. And
I mean, yeah. What if you had not gone that first time?
yeah,
You know?
if the girls had done their dancing lessons somewhere else,
Yeah.
that, or maybe they hadn't gone that day or something, the whole rest of my life would have been entirely different, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't have had the wonderful experiences that I've had. And I think, also, you mentioned exercise being good for mental health, and I think there's a growing body of research that says time spent outdoors,
Yes. Yes.
especially either in green spaces or close by water. I think those things are now beginning to be seen as good for our mental health as well. And
Yeah.
paddleboarding sort of led me to rediscover a love of camping. And I'm saying
Ah.
rediscover. I haven't really been camping since I was a teenager, and I'm in my mid to late 50s now. But I
Yeah.
rediscovered, you know, because of stand-up paddleboarding, I rediscovered the joy of camping. And just putting if I'm doing a multi-day trip, I can just put my tent inside a dry bag. It goes in the front of my boards, and I can just paddle somewhere. And when I get there, I put the tent up. And because I've
Ah.
been active all day, and I'm out in the fresh air, I'm tired, so I'm not. People say, "I couldn't go camping because I've got a sore back, or I wouldn't get to sleep." But if you've been exercising all day,
All day.
and you're tired, you just crawl into your tent, you crawl into your sleeping bag, you fall asleep straight away. And I think, just when the sun comes out, you wake up, as
Yeah.
opposed to at home, when my alarm goes off, and
Mhm.
I press snooze and grumble a little bit,
Yeah.
and press snooze again 10 minutes later, and wake up in a really bad mood because I've got to get up. But when you're in your tent and the sun's
Yeah.
shining, it's just, yeah, it's time to get up. I'll get up, and I'll get my little stove out, and I'll make a cup of coffee, and I'll have breakfast. And
Yeah.
when I'm away in these camping and paddling trips, I do leave life's worries behind me.
Oh,
And they're still there when you get back. But even if you get
yeah.
a few days off from your troubles, then that's got to be a
Yeah.
good thing.
Well, and you brought up a good topic about being, of course, being outside, but being near water. There's tons of studies about that too. And for what we did, I mean, we sold all of our stuff and moved here to the coast so that we could be by water. I mean,
Yeah.
I just feel like being by water, in water, around water is I don't know, it just does something. It does something positive mentally, physically, spiritually. I feel like it's healing in a way.
Yeah.
And so to hear you like getting on the water all the time, I think it's, gosh, I just think there's so many benefits to that. That all sounds so amazing. And I'm so glad that you took that lesson that day.
So am I.
Let's get to your fast five questions. The first one is sunrise or sunset?
Definitely for me, sunset.
Okay.
I love going for a sunset paddle where you go out onto the water maybe about half an hour before the sun's due to set,
Yeah.
and you wait for the sun to set, and we get some lovely sunsets over the marine lake here at the right time of
Yeah.
year as well. So I'd say definitely sunset. You're right. I am an elaborating person because I'm now. I
Yeah.
didn't give
No,
you just that quick answer there, but I
no,
enjoy a sunrise paddle. I just don't like getting up in the morning.
well, and my question, I knew that I figured I was going to be talking through these. That's why I took out the fast, but, uh, where have you seen the best sunset while paddleboarding?
The best sunset I've ever seen while I was on a stand-up paddleboarding trip, but I wasn't paddling at the time,
Oh,
was
okay.
at I was wild camping at the side of a lake in Sweden called, my Swedish pronunciation is probably appalling, but Sir John Skagern, I would pronounce
Okay.
it, and it's quite a big lake in Sweden, and I randomly found myself there one night wild camping. It was on that same trip when I was on my way up to Hammerfest, and I
Yeah.
just put my tent up before it went dark, and the sun just sort of dropped low over the hills behind the water, but it was purple, everything, the
Oh,
sky, the water. It was like a sort of almost a drawing with sort of crayons or pastels or something, and it was
yeah.
purple. It wasn't that sort of yellowy red maroon sunset that I love, but we're used to, and it was
Yeah.
just purple, and there was just a black rock in the middle of the lake, and it just looked like a sort of black glistening, and
Oh,
I don't know how to describe it. It was just such a contrast to everything else being purple. That's the favorite sunset I've ever seen
oh.
anywhere in my life.
While you're paddleboarding, would you rather encounter a whale or a shark?
I haven't encountered either. Interesting thing happened not so long ago when I was paddling in Carlingford Loch in Ireland, and there's a dolphin that lives there called Finn. I don't know why they called him Finn. I guess it's
Uh-huh.
a name for dolphins. And I, I, I was really, really keen to. There was a lovely sunset there, by the way, as well, when we paddled there.
Okay.
But I met up with Francie and Kathleen, a couple of online friends. They didn't do the whole of that trip with me, but they paddled over me from Greencastle, which is in Northern Ireland, to Greenore, which is in the Republic of Ireland. So I
Uh-huh.
crossed a kind of a border that day, if you like, and the beautiful sunset. And we were just coming into Greenore, which is where Finn the dolphin lives, and we were looking just looking all over the place, straight ahead, out to the side. I really hope we see Finn. We didn't see him, and
Oh, okay.
we got off the water, and we're just packing up off the water, and Finn the dolphin just sort of starts
What?
jumping in front of us. And when we got up to the promenade, a woman came up and approached us, and she said, "Did you not see Finn when you were out paddling?" And we were like, "No, we didn't see him." And she said, "Oh, he was swimming alongside you as you were paddling into the shore." And we were looking forward left and right, but we didn't sort of turn round and look at a right
Oh,
angle. If we had, we'd have seen him. So um,
oh.
if I'm allowed to choose between whale, shark, or dolphin, I
We're
would
going.
say dolphin.
Yeah, me too. Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, now you can
Yeah,
say that you paddleboard with Finn. I mean,
with Finn.
I think that's valid. You can say that.
Yeah, I think we did. Whether we saw it or not doesn't matter.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
were witnesses.
Right. That's amazing.
Maybe I'd say shark because the sharks that live around the part of the world where I live wouldn't do you any damage.
Yeah.
Probably the whales wouldn't either.
Plane or boat?
I think plane, just
Okay.
because of the ease of getting there. I've been on a couple of cruise holidays over the years, and I've really enjoyed that experience. But
Yeah.
I think I'd rather spend 2 hours on an aeroplane and then the next 5 hours paddleboarding
Yeah.
than spend 7 hours on a boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, what do you grab first for your trip? Your passport or your paddleboard?
Probably my passport because I'm going somewhere that I will need it, and
Right.
it's kind of a treasured possession as well.
Yeah.
It goes inside a dry sack that then goes inside a dry bag that goes inside
Yeah.
something else because that's especially
Yeah.
some of the places I go, I'd hate to lose my passport.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And you may have already answered this, but we're going to ask it anyway. Are you an early riser or a late sleeper?
Normally, I'm a late sleeper.
Okay.
I know that contradicts with what I said about sleeping in a tent and
Well, it's
camping,
different when
but
you're camping.
it
Yeah.
is, yeah. I'm not particularly a morning person, and I never have been.
Okay. Well, then that's good. It makes me feel a little bit better that we started at 8 o'clock your time.
Yeah, this time works absolutely perfectly for me. If it was
Okay.
8 o'clock in the morning, it might not be so good. And again, just talking about those sort of mental health and the voices in your head.
Mhm.
I personally find I get better as the day goes on. So when I wake up in the morning, I've got all the negative thoughts about the day ahead, and I've learned to just tell myself that the day will get better as it goes on, and it does. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess if we'd been having this interview at 8 o'clock in the morning, I might have woke up at 7 o'clock and sent you a text message. Oh, sorry, I'm not feeling very well today. But by the time 7 o'clock this evening came round, I was really excited and looking forward to it. So I'm definitely an evening person.
Okay. Okay, and then the question we ask everyone, and we think it's the most important, is what does a life well lived mean to you?
That's a really interesting question, and I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I'm still not entirely sure
Sure.
what I'm going to say because it's quite a deep question. But I think for me there's a recognition that life is or can be short. None of us really know how much time we've got left in this place that we call planet Earth, and I think what I want to do is just to try and use whatever time I've got left to try and use it as wisely and productively as possible. And I think that means spending time with friends and family, doing those things you enjoy. And for me, that is stand-up paddleboarding and
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to live my life.
I think that's beautiful. That's a beautiful answer. Whether you know it or not, I know so because I think when Jerry and I were reading your whole story, we were inspired. You're inspiring people. I mean, you're inspiring people, whether it's, it doesn't have to be stand up paddleboarding, but you're inspiring people to say, okay, like you said earlier, to say yes more
Yeah,
and to
yeah.
go after things that you might not even consider. I mean, if somebody told you the week before, hey, in a few years, you're going to have stand up paddleboard in 47 countries, I would imagine you would say, okay, you're crazy.
Yeah,
I've
I,
never
I
been
I would have
paddleboarding.
done. Definitely. You're absolutely right.
So you're right. Life is short and we should do more of the things, say yes to more things because we never know where those experiences are going to take us. And so you are truly an inspiration. And we call this episode series Spark in Our Lives, which sounds like a soap opera, but you really are sparking our lives for knowing what you're doing, you're going after it, and it brings you so much joy. And I just think that is wonderful.
Yeah, I agree with you. And if even one person who's listening to this episode goes out and tries something new as a result of the chat that we've had today, then I
Yeah.
think that would be absolutely wonderful.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that they will. I know that I'm gonna book us some paddleboard lessons, and we're actually gonna do it.
Please do. And if you get any photographs,
I will.
please get in touch and let me
I
know how it went.
will. I will definitely send you pictures for sure. Well, John, please tell our audience where they can find you, how they can follow along your stand-up paddleboarding adventures and all of that.
Okay, Shannon. So the main place that I'm active is on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram as well, and I have a blog. And my name sort of online on social media is Sup the World. So Sup is SUP. It's the acronym for stand up paddleboarding. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just Sup the World. So if anyone went onto Facebook and typed in facebook.com/sup the world, they would find me.
Okay.
If they went to stoptheworld.com, they would find my blog, which I have a love-hate relationship with my blog. It's not completely up to date, but I try and put a few interesting stories on there, and I've got links to the places I've paddled. And I'm also on Instagram as well, so that's sup_the_world_. And I would love
Okay.
it if anyone wanted to follow me on any or
Yeah.
all of those places.
I'm going to link all of those down in the show notes as well so that they can just click it and get to it and find you easily. I cannot thank you enough for being here. This was so great. I was looking forward to this ever since it was booked. So I really appreciate it. I know Jerry's going to love this conversation. We really appreciate your time.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's been my pleasure and privilege to be here.
What a guy.
Oh, indeed. Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
remember when we recorded the episode, I was a little tired that afternoon.
Uh-huh.
I don't even remember what was going on, but I just remember I was a little bit tired but I couldn't wait to talk to him.
Yeah.
And John really lit a spark in me. When we were finished, I was ready to tackle something new,
Yeah.
something I hadn't done before. And now I sort of think about that in my daily life ever since we had it recorded.
Oh, sure. I mean, and he was just somebody that drew me right in when I started watching the interview you did with him.
Yeah.
And just such a neat topic, stand-up paddleboarding.
I know. I mean, what a story
Yeah.
to not only just decide, yes, I'm going to try this thing out, paddleboarding, but now to have the goal of paddleboarding in every country. And he's been to 47 countries paddleboarding.
Yeah.
I can't even say I've been to 47 countries doing anything.
No.
And I feel like, we're open to travel and all that, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Yeah. Many people have not been in that many countries, but to do it with that one theme of paddleboarding everywhere, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun.
It's just amazing.
Uh-huh. If you know of someone who could use some inspiration or would enjoy this conversation, please share it with them. Please send them a screenshot, a link. We would appreciate it.
Yep. As you always say, Jerry, sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring.
As always, you can find us at arneradventures.com, on Instagram at arneradventures, also linked in the show notes.
So until next time, enjoy the journey that you're on. We're wishing you lots of adventures.
Bye.